Everybody talks about Loka Chapter 1 Chandra as the beginning of a universe, and that's precisely why I don't want to. Because if the only way to praise a film is to promise that future film will fix the flaws, then it's not a film, it's an early access trailer. So let's just Loka Chapter 1 Chandra on merit, on mood, on meaning. Not as a franchisee prologue, but as a standalone myth. Because Loka Chapter 1 Chandra, when stripped of the hype, is a film about immortality disguised as paperwork, discipline mistaken for purity, and a vampire who works the night shift because HR doesn't know how to schedule eternity. Hello, I'm Aryan, and today we are gonna talk about a recent Malayalam blockbuster whose name till now I have repeated twice, so you haven't changed at all. Immortality hidden in bureaucracy. Chandra's immortality isn't announced with lightning or fangs, it whispered through a mundane conversation with a weary document forger. She greets him, "You have grown old." He smiles, weary but fond, "You haven't changed at all. Next time you come, my son will be here instead of me." That one line quietly detonates the film. No expositions, no flashbacks, just a sentence heavy with centuries. He ages, she doesn't. He talks about succession, she is her own successor. The scene plays like a drama, but it's actually a tragedy in slow motion. The moment you realize everyone she meets will fade into someone else's memory while she remains perfectly unnaturally constant. And then comes the backstory drip. Chandra has lived in Sweden for years, a place where winter stretches the night long enough for people like her to exist freely. But it's also a metaphor for exile. Sweden isn't home, it's a hiding place. Every immortal needs a country cold enough to erase their footprints. She lives there not to thrive but to avoid sunlight and attention. Sweden is a place where time itself walks slower. She doesn't migrate, she changes epochs. When the old man says, "Next time my son will be here," he might as well be saying, "Time will try again." The window and the boy. When Chandra moves into her new Bangalore flat, she opens the window for the first time, a simple act filmed like a revelation. Light floods in, soft and dangerous. Across the street, Sunny looks up and forgets how to breathe. His reaction is not lust, it's awe, like he's seen a constellation take human shape. But within minutes, she tapes the same window shut with old newspapers. The daylight had just met her is banished again. That single gesture defines her. She will let the world in only for a glance, never for a stay. Throughout the film, windows and glass quietly narrate her existence. They frame her as something seen but not touched, visible but unreachable. She is constantly behind the glass. In cafe doors, reflections, apartment panes, each shot becomes a portrait of distance. Glass separates and defines her. She is half in the world, half outside it. The symbolism deepens. Windows are barriers pretending to be invitation, like Chandra herself, approachable yet untouchable. The routine of the night. She takes a night job at a cafe. It isn't a lifestyle choice, it's a survival instinct. The cafe lights become her daylight, the moon her HR manager. Even her first proper human interaction, Sunny waving from across the street, happens under a flickering lamp. Not the sun, the newspaper on her windows. Practical but poetic. They mute the sun, but they also block headlines. The noise of the mortal world. She doesn't just hide from sunlight, she hides from the daytime conversation of humanity. But the time we see her carefully sipping blood from a sealed medical pack, the film has already taught us her truth without saying a word. No bats, no gothic mansion, just routines. The horror of Loka is that immortality has become paperwork and habit. Gabbar Singh and the Organato. Then comes one of those blink and you will miss it Easter eggs that tell you the director has a sense of humor. The organ traders, the scummiest men in the story, drive an auto with Gabbar Singh's face printed across it. A winking homage to villainy, a small meta joke about cinematic evil, but it's also tonal control, a hint that even the film's underworld has grown up watching movies about itself. Inspector Nechiappa Gowda, the Puritan in khaki. Let's talk about the man most misunderstood in Loka, Inspector Nechiappa Gowda. For him, discipline is divine, deviation is sin. The city at night is his Sodom, and he is both priest and executioner. He is introduced as a walking misogyny poster. But if you really look, and I mean look past the performance and into the ideology, you will see something else, a Puritan. Here's the definition. Puritans were a Protestant sect that sought moral purity, simplicity, and discipline in every part of life. They believed the world was fallen and only the righteous few, the elect, could maintain divine order through strict rules and self-denial. And in simple words, they were against the earthly joy. Now replace the Bible with a badge and you get Gowda, an Indianized Puritan. His entire morality is built on holy trinity of duty, discipline and disgust. He is not evil for pleasure, he is evil for order. When he refuses to salute his senior female officer, we are meant to hate his misogyny. And yes, that's real, but behind it lies his rebellion against corruption, not femininity. She had ordered him to illegal action and his moral code, as warped as it is, wouldn't bend. Goda's introduction scene is a masterclass in deliberate misdirection. The camera and the background score unfolds as though he is about to assault the woman in the white sari standing before him, but pause! That's the setup. The real reveal is subtler. His belief system doesn't allow him to tolerate any activity at night because to him only immoral acts happen after sundown. When his female superior officer intervenes and he refuses to salute her, the movie nudges us to label him as misogynist. And yes, he absolutely is. All Puritans are. His line about Bengaluru girls being spoiled is proof enough, but beneath that sexism lies something else, a moral absolute being crushed between two loyalties. The woman he refuses to salute isn't a symbol of gender to him. She is a symbol of compromise. She had forced him into illegal duties under her jurisdiction. But his conscience, his Puritan core, won't let him bend. And then, there's the organ trader's den scene, the one that quietly redefines him. When a goon complains to Gowda that he was beaten up by a woman, Gowda stays unmoved. But the moment he learns that the goon tried to hit the woman first, he shames him for it. It's contradictory and twisted, and that's exactly the point. Gowda isn't simply hateful, he's morally deranged by his own righteousness. His disdain cuts both ways. He despises women for stepping outside his order, but he also despises men who violate his private code of discipline. Gowda doesn't believe in people, he believes in conduct. He raids a party, scolds a group of college kids shouting, "Liquor, marijuana, can't you have fun with carom or ludo?" That line is both comic and tragic. A man so allergic to joy that he can only imagine board games as salvation. And when he spots Chandra at the same party, a woman who exists beyond his rules, his half-respect turns into holy rage. His creed cannot comprehend her, so it must destroy her. Chandra's biology of immortality. During Sunny's party invitation scene, Chandra was feeling cold, and the skin on her hand began to melt. Not literally, but it's filmed as if time is peeling her skin off. The idea is horrifying and brilliant. Immortality is not effortless. It needs constant feeding. Go too long without blood, and time catches up. She doesn't die, she decays back into the centuries she has escaped. That's when we finally grasp the world's vampire rules. They don't age, sunlight burns them, starvation accelerates their ancientness. Like watching history reclaim a person. Their hearts can kill them. No resurrection clause. And crucially, they cannot survive on animal blood. The last part matters. She buys medical blood from a peddler. If animal blood worked, she wouldn't risk exposure. So her diet isn't about preference, it's about necessity. The pouches she handles are guilt, sealed in plastic. Immortality here is not hunger for power, it's maintenance under moral pressure. The Kannada Malayali jabs, Kiliye Kiliye, and the cat who knew. One of the delights of Loka is its casual humor. The Kannada Malayali one-liners sprinkled through the script are warm and territorial, not divisive. The sound of two cultures bantering each other is perfectly integrated. And then, Kiliye Kiliye happens. The walk, the swagger, the neon blues, a frame so perfectly symmetrical it's practically made for Instagram reels. But what everyone forgets is what happens after, when the party fighting ends. She walks to Sunny, smiles slightly and says, "I had fun." The trembling half smile is the emotional center of the film. It's the first time she looks human, the first time she allows herself to feel joy without fear. There's also a cat. In the film, it hisses and backs away from her. Later, it lingers by her door, but never enters. Cats, folklore says, sense spirits. The movie never calls attention to it, but that small animal behavior is the film's quiet confirmation of what she is. Not dead, not alive, just other.
Nazili's voice note and rebirth of Neeli. When Nazili sends that voice message, she is not what we think. The film invites a very particular tension. It's as if the old stereotype of Neeli, the seductive Yakshi, is trying to claw back into existence, but Loka refuses to indulge it. Traditionally, Neeli in Malayalam folklore was a spectral temptress, trapped in white and jasmine, preying on men who wandered alone. Loka burns that costume. Kalyani Priyadarshan's Chandra wears denim, jackets, and the weariness of someone who has already outlived fashion. She is not designed for desire. She is designed for combat. Her first kill isn't a man she seduces, it's a trafficker she executes. She snarls, "You people will be dewormed," before snapping his neck. This is justice, not seduction. Her anger is historic, not hormonal. So, Nazili's panicked voice note isn't just a plot beat, it's a cultural echo. It represents the audience's old reflexes, the assumption that a powerful woman must be dangerous because she tempts. But Chandra doesn't tempt, she avenges. Flashback, storyteller, and the art of gentle spoon feeding. The film's flashback sequences, earthy, dusky, textured, explain the origin myth. How a young girl named Neely was betrayed, bitten, and reborn. But the movie doesn't shove this lore down your throat. It uses an author and his daughter as a narrative technique. The flashback arc, Neely's origin, the folklore, the priest, the curses, is easily the most cinematic section of the film. Every frame feels hand painted, firelight glowing on mud walls, the rhythm of Malayalam chants rolling like waves. But if you look closely, the film makes a smart narrative detour here. Instead of dumping mythological expositions all at once, it spoon feeds through a conversation between an author and his daughter. The father, who represents the audience intellect, speaks of Yakshini, Neeli, Kathanar, and Malayalam folklore with measured detail. The daughter, playing the dumber version of the viewer, listens wide-eyed and asks the naive questions we might hesitate to ask. The scenes becomes both explanations and commentary, not a lecture, but a bedtime mythology class that keeps the brain engaged without alienating it. And this approach matters because Loka takes a gamble with complexity.
The film assumes its audience can easily connect myth with metaphor, but also knows most viewers subconsciously crave guidance, so it balances. It never insults intelligence, but it guides it. Like a parent reading you a story whose words you already know but whose meaning you are just beginning to grasp. That's how Loka spoon feeds, not by simplifying, but by humanizing. The dream sequence, Sunny's nightmare. Sunny dreams that Chandra is chasing him through deserted Bangalore streets. The color are washed in deep indigo and silver. The roads infinitely looping. It's more allegory than fear. He is being chased by fascination. The city becomes a labyrinth of desire and dread. When he wakes, he isn't frightened of her. He is fascinated by his fear. Because by now, Chandra has stopped being a person to him. She is a gravitational field. Power that ages backwards. Most vampire lore says that older you are, the stronger you get. Loka rewrites that rule completely. God, a newly turned, can walk in daylight without burning. Chandra, centuries old, covers her windows like a survivor of fire. That inversion is deliberate. Immortality here is not growth, it's corrosion. Power is a battery that drains over time. The longer you live, the heavier you become. Morally, mentally, even biologically. Chandra's weakness in sunlight isn't a flaw, it's a fatigue. Immortality in Loka comes with depreciation. Time doesn't strengthen, it wears you down. It's a poetic justice for eternal life. The dogs and the wrath. The two animals haunt the edges of the film. The three-legged dog that follows Dulquer's Odeon, a mythical companion liminal like its master, and the local stray that traffickers kill for sport. That second death is Chandra's breaking point. Until then, she is being patient, evasive, almost reluctant, but the cruelty to an innocent creature ignites her ancient rage. She doesn't fight them. She erases them. Acid dissolves bodies and the camera cuts away just as the last scream curdles. Violence here isn't spectacle, it's a divine punishment. In the middle of the chaos, two dogs mark the boundary between man and myth. The first, the three-legged stray, is seen earlier with Dulquer's Odeon, a spectral presence symbolizing loyalty to the forgotten world of magic. And I don't trust the popular belief that it is the same swine as in the flashback, since only Neely got powers in the Soon flashback. The second, the innocent local stray, meets a cruel fate at the hands of the organ traders. The death is Chandra's tipping point. Until then, she is measured, distant, and avoids violence unless necessary. But when they kill the dog, something primal reawakens. The scene shifts gears from quiet tension to mythic fury. Chandra's eyes glaze over. The air hums with menace, and she destroys every one of them swiftly, methodically, and dissolves their remains in an acid factory. It's not vengeance, it's ritual. The dog's death is an echo of older folktales where animals sense and protect the divine. In killing the creature, the traffickers unwittingly kill innocence itself, and in Loka, that's a sin that only a vampire goddess can punish. Blood already spilled. When all the protagonists descend into the underground layer, something feels off. The place isn't silent, it's spent. The walls are slick with drying blood, the air metallic with aftermath. What's chilling is that this fight has already happened. The blood splatters act like a breadcrumb trail for the audience. Someone else was here. Someone who doesn't leave survivors. That someone is Dulquer's Odeon, as revealed later in the mid-credit scene. He was there, wiping his hands clean when Tomino stops Sunny from peeking into his room. But here's the elegance. Even before that reveal, the mise-en-scene tells you everything. This isn't just a shared universe Easter egg. It's a world building through residue. The idea that Loka's mythic beings fight unseen wars under our noses. By the time Chandra arrives, the first battle is over. The blood on the walls is proof. A history of violence painted in a real time. It's also narrative restraint. Loka trusts the viewers to connect the dots without a loud crossover cameos. The splatter on the wall is enough. Fear has foundation, empathy is cure. We hear it first as a memory, a line Gowda repeats like a scripture. Fear is the foundation of respect. It's not his idea, it's his inheritance. Words passed down from his father, Senior Gowda, the man who raised him on discipline instead of affection. The kind of father who believed emotion spoils men, and that obedience, not love, is a proof of character. To Nechepa Gowda, those words are gospel. His father's authority is absolute, the voice that built him and broke him. In flashback and his own dialogues, we see how deeply this philosophy shaped him. His father believed respect is a structure held up by fear. Fear of God, fear of law, fear of shame, and the young Gowda grew up on mistaking that fear for love. He carries that belief into adulthood, into uniform, into every confrontation. His policing is not duty, it's devotion. He wants to be the man his father would have saluted, the embodiment of discipline his father preached about, but never lived to see. Fear is the foundation of respect, becomes not just his creed, but his inheritance of loneliness. That's why Gowda's moral compass points inward and never outward. He doesn't want justice, he wants order. To him, crime and chaos are not wrong because they hurt people. They are wrong because they offend the memory of his father's world. And that's why his downfall feels so tragic rather than villainous. When he bites his mother to make her immortal, it isn't lust for power, it's nostalgia. He wants to rebuild his family. The only way he knows how, through permanence. But when she dies, the illusion collapses. His father's philosophy, his faith, his very sense of purpose, all crumble at once. The cop who thinks he's cleaner than sin, his relationship with mother is his last anchor. She is his personal deity, the symbol of all that's pure in a rotting world. But the vampire rules are cruel. And if even she couldn't survive purity, then purity itself a lie. He chooses to bite his own mother, not any Oedipus complex, but isolation. He believes that she is the only true pious human left, untouched by what he hates in the world. He can't imagine eternity without her. So he tries to drag her across the line. And she dies. His illusion detonates. His heart calcifies. Attachments? Gone. He doesn't want to fight Chandra anymore. He wants to meet the elder, to graduate from man to myth, skipping the part where you learn how to be human. By the time Chandra and Gowda meet, they are mirror images, shaped by opposite philosophies. He is the child of fear. She is the survivor of compassion. He thinks control builds respect. She knows empathy earns it. He enforces discipline. She practices mercy. And their final encounter is not just physical combat. It's ideological inheritance meeting moral evolution. When Gowda raises his gun, you can almost hear his father's voice behind it. Make them afraid, son. Then they will respect you. But Chandra doesn't cover. She doesn't even blink. She walks towards him, her silence dissolving his sermon. Her dagger, when it finally strikes, isn't vengeance. It's liberation. She is not killing the man. She is killing the philosophy. For a man who lived his life as a vessel of fear, she offers a strange mercy, an end without terror. What's haunting is that even in death, Gowda doesn't scream. His eyes look relieved, almost peaceful, as if finally the weight of his father's word has been lifted. The fear he once preached has finally left his body. If Freud were watching, he would probably light a cigarette and say, "Well, that's one way to resolve your mother issues." In that moment, Chandra's becomes something beyond savior or slayer. She becomes the empathy his father never gave him. The film in turn transforms the Puritan's death into a eulogy for misunderstood men. Men who inherited discipline but were denied tenderness. Fear is the foundation of respect, said Senior Gowda, but Loka chapter 1 Chandra quietly replies, fear can only build obedience, empathy builds respect. And that's the tragedy of Nechepa Gowda, a man who spent his life in enforcing his father's order only to find peace in the compassion of the very creature he thought he was meant to destroy. The knife jump and the missed glory. When Chandra leaps towards Gowda in the climax, dagger in hand, the scene almost touches greatness. The choreography is fierce, the emotion raw, but the camera won't sit still. Too many cuts, too many angles. This moment should have been framed like Nolan's truck flip in The Dark Knight, a single sustained shot that immortalizes the myth. Instead, it feels fragmented, denying the audience the catharsis that had been building. But maybe that's deliberate. Chandra's attack isn't a hero glory moment, it's exhaustion. There is no triumph in her eyes when she plunks the blade. Only relief. Still, cinematically, you wish the camera trusted the action more. Because that's where myth is born, in stillness, not stove. Even brilliance sometimes needs one less edit. Preserved, not dead. The film refuses to give Goda a clean death. At Kathanar's office, his body lies preserved, suspended in cold blue light, untouched by decay. It's not destruction, it's conservation. This matters for two reasons. One, it hints at resurrection, the possibility of bringing him back in future chapters, but more symbolically, it shows how Loka treats damnation. Death isn't punishment here, it's a pause. Every being in this world, divine or monstrous, is kept on hold, awaiting either redemption or revival. Goda's preserved corpse become a mirror to his ideology. He wanted life without moral decay, a world frozen in discipline, and now he is literally frozen, trapped in his purity forever. It's one of the quietest and the most haunting images in the film. The man who worshipped control is finally rendered completely still. Salt to stars. Now the scene everyone remembers, salt grains falling and morphing into galaxy of stars. The transition that becomes a meme, a marvel, a Twitter loop. But what matters isn't its prettiness, it's its philosophy. Salt preserves life, stars outlast it. Between them lies the eternal tension of this film, living among mortals while longing for the cosmos. And yes, it might remind you of some digital art you saw online before the movie release. Maybe that's the Mandela effect of the internet is we see beauty before we see context. But let's go deeper. That transition happens after the Chandra has finished fighting, after blood and fear, the ideology have burned themselves out. The film moves from material to celestial, from salt, the residue of pain, to stars, the echo of permanence. It's a cinematic sigh. One more thing I wanted to talk about is the motif of windows and mirrors, the glass that separates the world. From the moment Chandra steps into the frame, Loka teaches us to look through things. Glass, reflections, panes, mirrors, they all do the storytelling long before the dialogues arrive. Chandra is almost never introduced directly. She's filtered. We see we first see her through cafe windows, car glasses, or faint reflections, an outsider peering into a world that pretends not to see her. Even her early exchanges with Johnny unfolds through that pane of glass. Him on the inside with noise and warmth, her on the pavement under sodium light. It's a visual truth. Chandra isn't part of a society. She hovers just outside it. Like a rumor the world refuses to absorb. The motif sharpens after her identity is revealed. Windows turn into neutral frames, into barriers. When Nichepa Gowda tries to shoot her through the shuttered lobby window, it's not just an action, it's theology. A mortal man firing bullets across glass at an immortal woman who can't cross the same line without consequences. The scene isn't about distance, it's about dimensions. Symbolically, windows become the veil between two existences, the human and the mythic, daylight and underworld, faith and fear. Mirrors too echo that division. They reflect her form, but never her soul. Chandra is visible, but not knowable, present, but ungraspable. Glass in Loka is in transparency, its separation masquerading as clarity. It reminds us that some boundaries aren't meant to be shattered, only stared through long enough to recognize what waits on the other side, what the film leaves us with. When the credit rolls, the Michael duplicate flicker around the screen, we remember that this is just chapter 1. Loka, chapter 1 Chandra, doesn't just end with a cliffhanger, it ends with quite understanding. The vampires stop bleeding, the Puritans stop preaching, and Bangalore hums like a city catching its breath. What began with fake documents and organ trade becomes a story about discipline, loneliness, and the human craving to stay unchanging in a world built to decay. Goda mistake purity for control, Chandra discovered purity through compassion. Between them, the film finds a balance, immortality not as blessing, but as a burden. Chandra is the Yakshi reimagined, not a seductress, but a savior. She kills when mercy demands it, and saves when the pain insists. Goda, meanwhile, is no villain, just a man saluting the ghost of his father's rule. His death isn't defeat, it's a release. Fear finally going still. Even if no sequel comes, Chandra stands whole, proof that Indian cinema can build universe without losing poetry. In the end, it's not about gods or monsters, but about restraint. A vampire who learns to feel, and a mortal world just beginning to understand her. That's where we leave her, not in the sun or shadow, but in the quiet place where the salt becomes stars and the moonlight finally learns mercy.